Good morning, all. Alexis again. It is the morning. It is first thing in the morning. So if I look a little flushed, that's why. But oh, you see that new light? It's the light is just starting to come through the window. I was thinking about kind of my life and how I got here, how I got to the point where I was able to make some of the big decisions and some of the big life changes that I've made thus far. I think about moving across the country. I think about this new career that I started. It's not just like I started my career over, like I started in a completely new field. And I also moved out on my own for the first time. And in doing that, I couldn't just move away from my parents like 10 minutes down the street or even like an hour away. I moved across the country. It's a 5.5 hour flight to get back to my parents or for my parents to get to me. And I think I'm like a 3 hour flight from the closest of any of my family. So I'm not going to say I'm isolated, but it's just like it's a big decision. I think about some of like the hobbies that I've had over the years. Some of the trips that I've taken and just generally some life decisions that I've made, and I was trying to like distill it down to what's the core of why I was able to do that. It's a little hot. I'm sorry. My roommate got a bunch of plants and it's like tropical in here, even though it's like 23 degrees outside. And I think it comes down to two things, okay? One, I've always been an adventurous person. I've always been what I would describe as eclectic in terms of like doing things a little bit differently, being interested in a lot of different things. But I do think I got to a point at a certain age where I just kind of had unbridled audacity. And let me explain, because I think when we usually think of audacity, we think of like these men have all the audacity, right? Which is true. But and I had to look this up to make sure I was right. But like the first definition of audacity is just a willingness to take bold risks. And I think that's always kind of been part of my personality, at least probably once I got to high school. And beyond that. Before that I was a little more conservative, but once I got to the point where I was just like, we're gonna try it. And even if I don't know anybody that's tried it, I'm gonna be the first one so that the people that I know somebody that has tried it. I think that's been huge in my life. And the other thing is solo traveling. Solo traveling really changes, I think especially as a woman, it changes a lot about not only how you think about the world, as traveling in general does, but it changes a lot about the way that you think about yourself and your abilities. And we'll rewind just a little bit before I get to the point of when I started solo traveling. But I think, let's say right after high school, I got to the point where I was kind of tired of doing things like everyone else or trying to fit in with everyone else. I always kind of knew that I was a little bit different from the people that I was around. And I don't know, there was just like, there was a switch that flipped in my brain that's like, people aren't going to like me anyway. People are going to think that I'm weird regardless. So I may as well do what I want to do. And as a just like a small footnote, I also think that's like part of the reason not that I made the decision to like grow my locks out, but part of the reason I wasn't afraid to do it. And we'll circle back around. We're going to loop back around, okay? But anyway, post high school, I got to a point where I was just like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. So my first, like, it's not even weird these days. It's like one of those like cool things to do these days. But when I started getting into circus arts, and when I mean circus arts, like if you've heard of aerial silks or aerial hoop or contortion, like if you've ever been to like a Cirque du Soleil show, or I've even seen it in like commercials. I think that's first how I learned about it. Where there's like fabrics hanging from the ceiling, and then there's usually some woman hanging from the fabrics doing all sorts of tricks and whatnot. And I remember thinking, nobody comes out the womb knowing how to do this. So they've got to be going somewhere to learn how to do these skills, right? And I can learn how to do something. I can learn how to do that. So I looked it up. There's a place nearby. And I started doing aerial silks and absolutely fell in love with it. I didn't realize how much I loved movement. Like at that point, I had been working with a friend who was like kind of personal training me. I felt like I was in a good shape physically and like health wise. But this is something completely different. Like you're training muscles that you don't know you have. So anywho, I fell in love with it, and then I was like, I can keep going with this. So then I tried aerial hoop, which was also so much fun. And then I tried contortion, which is a whole different level of fun. And I remember like telling a couple people that I was doing it, and they were like, you joined a circus? And I'm like, I'm just doing something fun. Like, what? They're like, oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm going to Miami next week. And that was just like, I don't know. It was such a weird thing. That like what I wanted to do was weird, but I don't know. And then I got to a point where I was making pretty good money at my job. I was working at the hospital. Not in my like field of study, interestingly enough, but I was working at the hospital. I had super, super flexible hours, which was always important to me. And I had gone on like a couple trips with my family. And I was used to going on trips with my family. Just again, for context, lots of cousins, lots of aunts, and like several of them work for the airlines. So we all kind of traveled together and like on benefits and whatnot. So there were just always family trips. And I remember very vividly there being a couple trips where like one person was like, oh, I'm going here. And then suddenly there's like 7 people going. But if I wanted to go with my friends, it was like a whole thing. Either, people don't have the time, they don't have the flexibility, or they don't have the money to do what I wanted to do, or they didn't want to go the places that I wanted to go. And I want to make it very clear, there's nothing wrong with like going to Miami or going to Houston or going to, I don't even know, where to Chicago, maybe. But I wanted to see different places. Or like going on a cruise, which I did with some friends. Terrible experience, by the way. And so I was like, okay, either I'm not going to be able to go the places that I want to go. I'm not going to enjoy myself, because that was another thing. I would go on these trips, and like, even though I loved the people that I was with, trying to accommodate 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people on a 3-4 day trip is really difficult for everyone to get what they want out of the experience, right? And at some point, you have to kind of relinquish your desires and your like hopes for the trip so that everyone gets along. And then I remember like the one big friend trip I went on, at that point at least, it went so horribly. it, maybe a story for another day. Maybe we'll see. And I was like, you know what? What's stopping me from doing this on my own? And this is where I think the audacity comes in. Like, I've always had the mindset of, like, okay, if I take a calculated risk, what's the worst that can happen? Granted, going overseas, going across borders by yourself, a lot can go wrong. But I was really thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I can do this. And I remember telling my parents, like, hey, explaining to them, you know, anytime that I've been in a bad situation overseas, on a trip, in another country, in another state, somewhere I'm not familiar, it's never been because of me, it's been because of someone else. Yeah, it's been because of other people not taking into account local customs, or getting drunk in another country and not being able to control yourself, which I think even in a group is kind of dangerous, but you know, hey. And so I was talking to them about it. And of course, because they're parents, because they care about me, they were like, you're gonna die. Basically. And we're like, absolutely not. This is crazy. Where is this coming from? Like, you know, I think any loving parent that cares about you is going to have concerns. And it took me a few years before I took my first solo trip. But you learn so much about yourself and your abilities when you're like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to do the research so I can make, you know, the best decisions possible. And bringing this back to the beginning, like solo traveling, changing everything for me. I think on my first solo trip, which I took to Amsterdam, I spent 5 days in Amsterdam. And I did this like after I moved out of my parents' house. I was living with my grandmother at the time, and I think I was like 22. Yeah, because I'm 29 now. Anyway, I think I was around 22. 21, 22, somewhere around there. And my grandmother is like much less protective. Like, she cares. She's concerned, but she's like, you're grown, so do what you want. And so I spent 5 days in Amsterdam. I did a decent amount of research. I'd already been with my family, so I feel like, again, calculated risk. But I was just like, let's do it. Let's do this thing. And man, I truly believe that especially women, but everyone should take at least one trip. It doesn't have to be to some far-flung location. Doesn't have to be, you know, too far. But I think there's a lot that you learn in terms of problem solving. I think there's a lot that you learn in terms of being able to rely on yourself without, you know, the support of someone you already know. There's a lot that you learn about people, and communication, because even if you don't speak the language in Amsterdam, just about everyone does speak English. So there was another calculated risk on my part. You learn a lot about your ability to plan something or not plan something and it working out, like you being able to figure out the local transportation, figure out how the locks on your Airbnb work because they're different from the ones in the US. You know, you learn to be by yourself in your own thoughts. You learn to potentially meet new people. You learn who you are when no one's really watching. Like, yeah, you're around people. I was around people all the time during my trip, but solid chance that I was never going to see any of those people again. So what type of person are you when you don't really have any accountability? What type of person are you when you're stressed and you're alone and you have to rely on yourself? Do you break down? Do you, head down, problem solve through it and just like, power through the problem? And I think those skills have carried over into other parts of my life. Like, I'm still solo traveling, still planning on solo traveling this year, as well as with some friends. So my goal is 10 countries this year. I'm trying to hit 30 before 31. The pandemic messed me up, okay? But trying to hit 10 countries this year. Many of those probably, at least half of those will probably be solo. And when you've been across the planet on your own and figured it out, moving across the country doesn't feel as scary. When you can take a minute to breathe and pray. I know not everyone prays, but I certainly do. Pray through it, think through your decision, and then make a good one. There are so many aspects in your life where that will be beneficial. I see it even like in my career change, where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a calculated risk. And asking for help when you need it. Being discerning on who you can trust and what questions you can ask, and navigating unfamiliar situations. And I get, like, not everyone is going to have the circumstances. Not everyone's going to have the will. Not everyone is going to have the desire even to do something like solo traveling. Not everyone's going to have the circumstances. Did I say that already? I don't know. This is what happens when it's unscripted. But I do think there's a level of audacity that we should all be willing to exercise in our lives. Because the reality of it is, in most situations, and I recognize my privilege here, I'm a single woman with no children, no dependents. Even if you're married, there are other things you have to take into account, right? Like, moving a family of 4 across the country is very different than just a single woman up and going. But I do think there are ways to be audacious in our everyday lives. And I think we should all be trying to do it. Because I look back at my life now and I'm like, I know either way I would have lived an interesting life. But if I didn't have the level of unbridled, untethered, unbothered audacity that I do, my life would look very different. And I think in a way that I would consider to be less interesting. Now looking back, it's really cool to be able to say that, like, yeah, I did circus arts and I want to start again. We'll see if that happens this year. I spent a year learning to play the harp. I've been to Singapore and Morocco alone. I've moved across the country by myself. I mean, with God, lots of prayer with all of these things, but physically by myself, that's a lot. And it's only really because I had the audacity to be like, you know what? let's do it. So I think that's the lesson for today. That's what I'm taking away for myself to remember to continue doing. And maybe that's something that you can implement just a little bit more of in your own life. Find some small way to be audacious today. What does that look like for you? Audacious this week, audacious this month, audacious this year. Is it some stretch goal that you want to go after? Is it like, I don't know, whatever that looks like for you in your circumstances in your life, but let's all try to be a little more audacious. Bye.